So in this video, we're going to be discussing, well, what do we actually mean by a mind or a body? In the video, we'll distinguish between what are called accidental and essential properties. We'll talk about Descartes' view on what the essence of the mind is, and this will require us to go back to a consideration of the cogito that we considered earlier in the semester. Then we'll talk about Descartes' view on what the essence of physical bodies is. And here we're going to have to look at this really strange passage towards the end of the second meditation where Descartes seems to become obsessed with talking about a piece of wax. Now, it's strange, but it's actually a really important passage for Descartes. Then lastly, we'll talk about a few worries for the Cartesian conception of both the mental and the physical. So if we want to investigate how the mind and body are related to one another, we need to make sure that we have a clear idea of what we actually mean by those terms. So Descartes' second meditation is partly an attempt to clear up what these ideas really mean so we can investigate this idea more carefully. And in order to understand Descartes' position, we need to understand the following distinction. There are what are called accidental properties. So this is a property that something has, but it could exist without that property. So it's an accident that it has that property in some sense. And this is different than an essential property, where that is a property or a feature that something has that it could not exist without that property. So that feature is sort of definitive of that kind of thing. It captures the essence of that thing. So an example of an accidental property is I have brown hair. That's an accidental property since I could still exist without brown hair. If I dye my hair blue tomorrow, I'm still me. I don't cease to exist just because that feature changed. An example of an essential property is having four sides is an essential property of a square. If some figure sort of lost a side and it only had three sides, it would no longer be a square, since having four sides is sort of definitive of. It's part of the essence of being a square. So now, in order to set the stage for Descartes' argument for dualism, we need to review a little bit about Descartes' discussion of epistemology. So in the first meditation, Descartes, remember, was searching for any reasons to doubt his beliefs. And he was hoping to discover beliefs that were sort of absolutely certain. And the biggest skeptical doubt that he raised was that possibility of the evil genius, who was sort of all-powerful and was hell-bent on using its power to trick Descartes into forming false beliefs about himself and the world around him. Now, the second meditation begins with Descartes trying to determine whether there's any beliefs that he has that he can be certain are true, even while admitting the evil genius as a possibility. And so Descartes, remember, arrives at the first belief that he thinks survives even this evil genius doubt. The cogito, or this belief, I am, I exist. So why does this survive his doubts from the first meditation? Well, remember, if you did not exist, then you couldn't have any thoughts, experiences, or beliefs at all. Thus, in order to even have the thought, I exist, it has to be true that you exist. Even if you're dreaming, and even if there's an evil genius, anytime you have the thought that you exist, it must be true. So notice, it's your awareness of your own thought or consciousness that guarantees that you exist, at least while you're entertaining that thought. All right, so Descartes thinks the discovery of this cogito is sort of absolutely important for a variety of reasons. First, it's the very first belief he finds that he thinks he can be certain of, and he could thereby use it as part of a foundation for building other beliefs, a secure foundation. He tries to use it to show that beliefs about our own mind are more certain or better known than beliefs about our bodies. Because I could be dreaming that I have hands, or an evil genius could shoot the picture of hands into my mind, even if I didn't have them. But so I can have some reason to doubt the existence of my body without having any reason to doubt the existence of my own mind. Descartes also uses this to support his rationalism. Because, well, he says, how do I know that I exist? Well, it's not from my senses, because my senses, my sight, my hearing, my taste, my touch, they all tell me about sort of my physical body. But all of the things my senses tell me about is thrown into doubt by the dream hypothesis or by the evil genius. So he says, the way that I know that I exist is purely by using my thought alone. It's delivered by my reason as opposed to by my experience. So all of these are supposed epistemological lessons that Descartes attempts to derive from the discovery of the cogito. These are meant to be lessons about how we gain knowledge about the world and what kind of knowledge we have. However, more relevant to our current purposes, Descartes also believes that reflecting on the cogito teaches us important lessons for thinking about the very nature of the mind. So Descartes thinks the cogito helps us identify what is essential to, or what is definitive of, both himself and his mind. When he discovers the cogito, notice, he's currently in doubt about whether his body exists. Since, as I said, it's possible that his body, his hands, legs, eyes, brain, is merely an illusion created by the evil genius. And so his knowledge of his existence, as I said, derives solely from his awareness of his thought. So Descartes concludes that the essential or defining feature of the mind or mental things is thought or thinking. That's what makes something a mind, is just the fact that it has thought or that it is capable of thinking. And this Cartesian concept of the mind seems to get a lot of examples right. Beliefs are paradigmatic examples of mental states. And when I believe that my daughter has curly hair, notice I'm thinking about my daughter. Desires are also paradigmatic examples of mental states. And when you desire to become a doctor by 2028, notice in that desire, you're thinking about doctors and you're thinking about the future. Memories are other sort of paradigmatic examples of mental states. And when I remember the birth of my daughter Ada on October 19th, 2020, I'm thinking about my daughter and I'm thinking about the past. So in all these cases, we have examples of mental states, of things that are in our mind, and they all involve thought or thinking, just like Descartes suggests. And notice, a rock is a paradigmatic example of something that's not a mind, and intuitively we think a rock does not have any thoughts. It doesn't think anything about the past, present, or future. And so Descartes' idea that the mind is essentially just a thinking thing, and that what makes something a mental state is that it involves thought, gets all these examples right. But now we need to reflect a bit on the other concept that makes an appearance in discussions of dualism and physicalism: bodies in the physical. And so we have a clearer idea of what we mean by a mind, but what do we mean by something that's a body or something that's physical? Arriving at a better understanding of what makes something a physical object is one of the goals of Descartes' really strange wax passage. So in this passage, Descartes gives an example. He grabs a sort of paradigmatic physical object like a piece of wax, and he looks at it, and he uses his senses to learn everything he can about it and to better understand the nature of physical objects like it. And when he inspects the piece of wax, he notices it's hard, it's cold, it smells of honey, it tastes sweet, it has a specific color, it has a specific shape, it has a specific size, and it makes a specific noise when he flicks it. So he's using all of his senses here to gain information about this piece of wax. But now, in the example, Descartes takes the piece of wax and puts it next to the fire, and he notices that all those things he sort of discovered with his senses have changed. Now the wax is soft. It's hot. It no longer smells of honey. It no longer tastes sweet. It has a different color than it did before. It has a different shape than it had before. It has a different size. And it no longer makes the same noise when he flicks it. All right. So Descartes then asks, is it still the same piece of wax? Is it still the same physical object? And Descartes thinks, look, this is obvious. Of course it is. Physical objects can change all these properties, their color, their size, shape, smell, etc., without ceasing to exist as that physical object. And so this leads Descartes to reflect on the following question. What's the nature or essence of this wax? What's the nature or essence of physical objects? And Descartes gives a number of answers. First, he says it can't be any of the sensible properties, since the wax can lose any of those without ceasing to exist. So its shape, its size, its smell, its taste, all of these things that our senses told us about when we sort of inspected it, those are merely accidental properties, since it continued to exist even after it lost those features. And so Descartes suggests that extension, so taking up space, is an essential property of the wax. It couldn't stop having extension. So if it stopped taking up space, then it would cease to exist altogether. There would just be no physical object there. And so Descartes led to this idea that the essence of physical things, what makes them physical things, is just that they have extension. They take up space. So this leads to the Cartesian conception of bodies, where the essential or defining feature of body or physical things is extension. This Cartesian concept seems to get a lot of examples right, yet again. A rock is a paradigmatically physical thing, and it takes up space. A cell is a paradigmatically physical thing, and it too takes up space. My brain is also a paradigmatically physical thing, though obviously it's more complex than either a rock or a cell, but it too takes up space. It has extension. It's important that we have this sort of clarification of what we mean by a mind and what we mean by a body, because it helps to clarify what it would mean to say that everything that exists is physical, like the physicalist says. Given the Cartesian conception of mind and body, that would mean that everything that exists has extension, has a location, and it exists in space. It also helps us clarify what the dualist means when they say that the mind is not physical. Given the Cartesian conception, the dualist is saying that the mind and mental states, such as experiences, beliefs, emotions, desires, and memories, are not extended, and they don't exist in space. They have no size, no shape, no location, etc. However, note that even if Descartes has given the correct account of the meaning of the sort of words or ideas, mental and physical, that by itself doesn't answer the debate between dualists and physicalists. So even though the mind is understood as a thinking thing, and physical objects are understood as things that have extension, that doesn't mean that they are separate things. It's possible that one and the same thing that has thought and thinking, the mind, maybe those things are also things that have extension and are thereby physical things, as would be the case on the mind-brain identity theory that we talked about earlier. All right, now, there are some worries for the Cartesian conceptions of the ideas of the mental and the physical. So there's worries both for the conception of the mental, and there's worries for the conception of the physical. Firstly, it's unclear whether certain emotions, like depression or happiness, always involve thought about something. Now, you can be depressed about something in particular. You could be happy about something in particular, but sometimes you just feel depressed, but there's no specific thing that your depression is about or sort of thinking of. Similarly, you can just sort of be happy in general without there being any specific thing that you're happy about. Similarly, it's unclear whether certain sensations, like the feeling of a pain or a feeling of a tickle, or just a red after image in your visual field, it's not clear that those involve thought or thinking. Lastly, Locke famously brought up this example. Well, what about when you're in a dreamless sleep, or when someone's in a coma that they then wake up from? It seems as if their mind didn't cease to exist. That person was still there. They weren't just they don't need to be actively thinking for their mind to still exist. It's not like our mind goes out of existence every time we go to sleep at night, and then only comes into existence when we wake up or when we start dreaming. On the other side, with respect to the physical, Contemporary physics appeals to numerous entities that lack extension, that don't have take up space. There are point particles, such as electrons. There are various fields and forces, such as gravity. Nonetheless, these things, even though they don't take up space, they don't have extension in any straightforward sense, they do seem to be examples of physical things. So maybe we need a better account of what it is for something to be mental or what it is for something to be physical. Otherwise, yet again, it's not even clear what it means to say that everything is physical until we get those clear ideas. How to correctly conceptualize the physical has been an issue of a lot of debate these days in contemporary philosophy of mind and even in the philosophy of physics. But we're not going to try to settle that debate. Descartes' conception of the mental and the physical, imperfect as it may be, should still be enough to at least get us started in thinking about the debate between physicalism and dualism. And when it might matter that his conception has problems, I'll bring that up and explicitly mention it. So that's it for this video. See you next time.